Hello again, my darlings. Today's story is about a woman who thought she had complete control of every situation she walked into, until her client stopped being a client and started being something she had no system for. Because some people don't fit into the categories you've built for them, and the harder you try to keep them there, the closer they get. If you're ready, let's begin. I've been her personal trainer for 6 months. Last week, she pinned me against the wall. GL Book. Hello again, my darlings. Today's story is about a woman who thought she had complete control of every situation she walked into, until her client stopped being a client and started being something she had no system for. Because some people don't fit into the categories you've built for them, and the harder you try to keep them there, the closer they get. If you're ready, let's begin. Let me tell you exactly what happened. It was a Thursday evening, 7:15, the last session of the day. The gym was almost empty, just us and the sound of the ventilation system and the particular quality of light that comes through industrial windows at dusk. We'd been training for 40 minutes, and she was pushing hard, the way she always pushed in the last 20 minutes of a session, like she was working something out rather than working out. I said something about her form, something technical, something I'd said a dozen times. Her left shoulder dropping on the press, the correction she knew but sometimes forgot when she was tired. She put the bar down. She turned around. She looked at me for 1 second with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Then she crossed the space between us, 4 steps, maybe 5, took my shoulders in both hands and put my back against the wall. Not roughly, not gently either, precisely, the way she did everything. She was close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off her skin and smell the specific clean sweat smell of someone who had just worked very hard. And she looked at me with those dark eyes and said, very quietly, "Stop telling me what's wrong with me." I stared at her. "I'm your trainer," I said. "That's literally—" "Not tonight," she said. "Tonight I know exactly what's wrong with me. I don't need the catalog." We were very close. Her hands were still on my shoulders. The wall was solid behind me. "Ivy," I said. "Quinn," she said back. And then she stepped back, picked up her bag, and left. I stood against the wall for a full minute before I moved. 6 months. I need to tell you about 6 months. Her name was Ivy Ashworth, and she had walked into the gym on a Tuesday morning in April with a referral from a physiotherapist and the specific posture of someone who was used to being the most capable person in any room, and had recently, through injury, been reminded that the body has opinions of its own. She was 36, dark hair always back, the kind of face that was striking rather than pretty, strong jaw, direct eyes, the sort of features that looked like they'd been assembled for function rather than effect. She wore expensive gym clothes the way she wore everything, which was like they were simply the correct thing for the situation, and she'd given no further thought to it. She was a surgeon. I found this out in the first session when I asked about the shoulder injury, and she described it with the specific clinical precision of someone who had spent years looking at bodies as systems rather than experiences. She told me the mechanism of injury, the degree of damage, the recovery timeline her consultant had given her. She did not tell me how it had happened. I did not ask. "What do you want from training?" I asked instead. She looked at me with the assessing look I was already learning to recognize. "Full function," she said. "Strength. I want to be back in the OR in 8 weeks." "That's ambitious." "That's the timeline." "Your consultant's timeline or yours?" A beat. "Mine." I looked at her. 8 weeks is possible if we're consistent and you don't push too hard. I push appropriately. "Surgeons always think they're pushing appropriately," I said. "They're usually pushing too hard." She looked at me for a moment. Then something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, the predecessor of one. "Noted," she said. That was the first session. 40 minutes, controlled, me watching her mechanics and her watching me watch her, with the specific attention of someone who assessed everything. She came back Thursday, and the following Tuesday, and the Thursday after that. Within 3 weeks, we had a schedule. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 7 to 8, the last slot of my day. Within a month, I knew her mechanics better than any other client I'd had. The left shoulder tendency, the hip flexor tightness from long hours standing at an operating table, the way her right side compensated for the injured left with a stubbornness that required consistent correction. I knew other things too. She arrived exactly on time, never early, never late. She didn't make conversation before sessions. She came in, changed, was ready. She made conversation after, occasionally, in the specific way of someone who had decided the session was over and could now be a person rather than a patient. She drank water in precise, measured amounts. She had a particular expression when something was working. Not satisfaction exactly, more like confirmation, the look of someone whose hypothesis has just been proven. She smelled like something that took me 3 sessions to identify. Dark amber and something green underneath. Vetiver, maybe. No, not vetiver, something crisper. Cedar, I thought eventually. Dark amber and cedar. Clean and specific. I noticed this and told myself it was because scent was part of assessment. You learned your clients through all available information. This was not entirely a lie. The shoulder improved faster than the 8-week timeline. By week 6, she had full range of motion, and I'd shifted the sessions from rehabilitation to strength building, which changed the dynamic. She was no longer working against limitation, she was working toward something, and the difference in her was visible. She pushed harder, she concentrated differently, she became, session by session, more present in her body in a way that I'd learned was not natural for people who spent most of their working life inside their head. "You're fighting the weight less," I said one Thursday in week 7. She was between sets, breathing steady, not looking at me. "What does that mean?" "It means you're working with it instead of against it. Most people try to overpower. You've stopped trying to overpower." She looked at me then, the assessing look, but with something different in it. "Is that a compliment?" she said. "It's an observation." The corner of her mouth. "You're very careful with compliments." "I'm careful with everything." "Yes," she said. "I have noticed." She picked up the weight and went back to work. I watched her and thought about what she'd noticed and told myself, firmly, that it was irrelevant. The first time I understood I was in trouble was in week 9. She had a bad session. Not technically, her form was good, her numbers were up, but something was wrong underneath it. Something I could see in the set of her jaw and the specific quality of her effort, which was punishing rather than purposeful. She was working something out and not in the good way. I let it go for 30 minutes. Then I said, "Stop." She looked at me. "Whatever you're doing, stop," I said. "You're going to injure yourself again." "I'm fine." "Your jaw has been clenched for 20 minutes. You're not fine." She put the weight down. She turned to face me. Her expression had the specific flatness of someone who has been told an accurate thing and is deciding how to respond to it. "Difficult day," she said. "Do you want to talk about it, or do you want to stop working it out on the equipment?" A long pause. "Neither," she said. "Okay." I crossed my arms. "Then we do something different. Follow me." I took her to the stretching area, mats, dim corner, away from the weights. I had her lie down and I walked her through a slow, deliberate sequence, nothing demanding, just the body being allowed to release rather than perform. She was resistant at first, the resistance of someone who finds stillness harder than effort. And then she wasn't, and I watched her face change as the tension left it. When we finished, she lay there for a moment without moving. "What was that?" she said. "Stretching?" "That was not just stretching." "No," I said. "It wasn't." She sat up. She looked at me with the expression I was cataloging without meaning to, the one that was more open than she usually allowed, the direct gaze without the assessment overlay. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me. It's what you needed." "How did you know what I needed?" I looked at her. "I've been watching you for 9 weeks," I said. "I know what you look like when you're working something out versus working something through. Today was the wrong kind." She looked at me for a long moment. 9 weeks, she said. It's my job to pay attention. Yes, she said, but not like that. She picked up her water bottle and left. I sat on the mat for a moment and thought about what she meant by not like that. I thought, I know. Month 3. She was back in the OR. She told me on a Tuesday with the specific, compressed satisfaction of someone for whom this was the whole point. Efficient, factual, moving on. But she kept the training slots. This was not something I'd expected. The injury was resolved, the rehab complete, the original goal met. There was no clinical reason. You could train anywhere now, I said, with anyone. She looked at me. I know. So why? Because this is working, she said. Simply, as if it were obvious. I don't change things that are working. I held her gaze for a moment. Okay, I said. Okay, she agreed, and picked up the weight. I told my colleague Brendan about it that evening, in the way you tell colleagues things when you need to say them out loud to someone who isn't involved. She stayed, I said. Clients stay all the time. Not when the clinical reason is resolved. Brendan looked at me. He was perceptive in the specific way of people who've worked in gyms for years, which is to say he had watched a large number of human beings in states of physical effort and had developed an accurate read on most of them. What's she like? He said. Precise, I said. Self-contained. Surgeon. She talks like she's giving testimony. And you stayed late on a Tuesday to tell me she kept her sessions. I looked at him. The scheduling needed updating, I said. Right. He picked up his coffee. What's her name? Ivy. He nodded slowly in the way that meant something. Quinn, he said. What? Nothing. He stood up. Nothing at all. I went home that evening and thought about, not like that, and the 9 weeks of watching, and the amber and cedar, and the way her face changed when the tension left it on the mat. I thought, this is a problem. I was a professional. I had been a trainer for 7 years. I had worked with clients of all kinds, some of whom were difficult and some of whom were easy, and some of whom occupied a space that required careful management, and I had always, without exception, maintained the professional line. I was going to maintain it now. I was very firm about this. I maintained it for 3 more months. Month 4 brought a shift that I noticed and couldn't name. She was different in sessions. Not better or worse, just different. More present somehow. She made eye contact more. She asked questions that weren't strictly about training, about how I'd ended up in this work, about what I did outside of it. Small questions delivered in the offhand way of someone who wanted the information but wasn't going to admit they wanted it. I answered. I asked back. The after-session conversation stretched from 5 minutes to 15 to occasionally half an hour. The gym quiet around us, the 2 of us on the bench by the water cooler, talking about things that had nothing to do with shoulder mechanics. She was interesting. I want to say that plainly because it matters. Not interesting in the way that attractive people are often mistaken for interesting, but actually specifically interesting. She had read widely and thought carefully about what she'd read, and had opinions she'd formed rather than received, and she argued for them with the precision of someone who'd spent years in a field where imprecision had real consequences. She made me think. Not many people did that in the particular way she did. Not challenging exactly, more like sharpening. Sitting with her for half an hour after a session left me cleaner in my thinking than I'd been going in. I noticed this and noted it in the wrong file. Month 5. She brought me coffee. This happened on a Thursday, without comment. She arrived with 2 cups from the place around the corner, set one on the desk without looking at me, and started warming up. I looked at the cup, then at her. She was already on the mat, back to me, stretching. I picked up the cup. Black, which was not how I took it. The following Tuesday she brought 2 cups again. This time mine had oat milk in it. I looked at it for a moment. You remembered, I said. You mentioned it, she said, 2 months ago. She didn't look up from her warm-up. It's just coffee. It was not just coffee, and we both knew it. I drank it and said nothing. The following Thursday, she brought coffee again, and I thought about Brendan, and not like that, and the professional line I was maintaining with increasing effort and decreasing conviction. That was when the other client arrived. Her name was Freya, late 20s, new referral, 3 sessions a week for a marathon training block. She was easy company, genuinely funny, the kind of person who made the work feel lighter. We got on well from the first session. She laughed at things I said. I laughed at things she said. By the second week, she'd started staying after sessions to talk, which was normal, which was something that happened. What was not normal was the Thursday it overlapped with Ivy's slot. Freya was finishing up. Her session ran until 7. Ivy's started at 7, and I was at the desk when Ivy came in. She saw Freya. She saw Freya say something to me that made me laugh. She looked at me across the gym with an expression that lasted approximately 1 second before it was gone, replaced by the usual composed neutrality. But I'd seen it. I knew what I'd seen. The session that followed was the most intense one we'd had in 6 months. Not aggressive, she was never aggressive, but compressed, like she was running something through at high pressure. She pushed harder than I'd let her push in months. When I corrected her form, she acknowledged it with a precision that was almost pointed. At the end, I said, "Ivy." She was putting equipment away. "What?" without turning. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "You pushed too hard tonight." "I pushed appropriately." "Your jaw was clenched for 30 minutes." She turned around. The expression on her face was the controlled version, the one that meant something was happening underneath and she was deciding whether to let it surface. "Who's Freya?" she said. I looked at her. "New client," I said. "You laughed." "She's funny." A pause. The controlled expression holding, barely. "Right," she said, picked up her bag. "Ivy." She stopped, back to me. "You came in here 3 times a week for 6 months," I said. "You brought me coffee. You stayed late. You asked me questions." I paused. "And then someone else made me laugh and you pushed too hard for 30 minutes." Silence. "What exactly," I said, "are we talking about?" She turned around slowly. She looked at me with the expression I'd been getting fragments of for 6 months. The open one, the one underneath the surgeon's precision, the one that showed up on the mat when the tension finally left. "I don't know," she said, "what we're talking about." "Yes, you do." A long pause. "Quinn," she said. "Ivy." "This is—" She stopped, started again. "I don't do this. I don't—" Another stop. "I'm your client." "I know." "This is inappropriate." "Probably." "It would compromise the professional—" "Ivy." I held her gaze. "Freya is a client." "You know what the difference is." She looked at me. The gym was very quiet. The ventilation system, the dusk light through the industrial windows, the specific warmth of a space that had been, for 6 months, hours in a way I hadn't let myself name. "The coffee," she said. "Yes." "I noticed yours 2 months ago, without thinking." She looked at the floor. "I don't do things without thinking." "I know." "That was notable." She looked at me. "I filed it incorrectly." "What was the correct file?" She held my gaze. "You know what the correct file is," she said. Before we continue, this version is made for YouTube, so some of the more intimate moments ahead have been softened. The full version, with every scene intact, is on my Patreon, link in the description. And that was Thursday of week 22. Thursday of week 24 was the wall. I had been thinking, in the intervening 2 weeks, about the correct file. About the coffee and the 30 minutes of talking, and the 9 weeks of watching, and the amber and cedar, and the jaw that clenched when something was wrong. About the line, and whether it had already been crossed, and when and which direction I was standing on. She had not said anything further after the Freya conversation. She came to sessions, she was professional, She was also, I was aware, managing something with the specific effort of someone who had decided on a course of action and was sticking to it by force of will. I was doing the same. Thursday of week 24 was different from the start. She came in with the quality of someone who had been deciding something all day and was running out of road. The session was good, technically clean, appropriately pushed, form correct. But underneath the session was something I could feel in the room, the way you feel pressure before weather changes. 30 minutes in, I said something about her left shoulder. She put the bar down. She turned around. She looked at me for 1 second. Then she crossed the space, took my shoulders in both hands, and put my back against the wall. Precisely, the way she did everything. Close enough that I could feel the heat of her and smell the amber and cedar and the clean exertion underneath it. And her dark eyes were very direct and very close, and she said, very quietly, "Stop telling me what's wrong with me." "I'm your trainer," I said. "That's literally—" "Not tonight." Her hands were warm on my shoulders. "Tonight I know exactly what's wrong with me." We were very close. The wall was solid behind me. Her hands hadn't moved. "Ivy," I said. "Quinn," she said back, my name in her mouth, low and specific. And then she didn't step back. She stayed exactly where she was and looked at me with the expression that had been underneath everything for 6 months. Not the surgeon's precision, not the controlled assessment, not the composed neutrality. Just her. The actual version. Open and direct and making no attempt to be anything other than what it was. "Tell me to step back," she said. I looked at her. Her hands on my shoulders, the amber and cedar, the 6 months of sessions and coffee and 30 minutes of talking, and the jaw that clenched when Freya made me laugh. "No," I said. She kissed me. Not soft, not tentative, not the kiss of someone who had been deliberating for 6 months and was now being careful about it. The kiss of someone who had decided all the way and meant it entirely, both hands moving from my shoulders to my face, warm and specific, and she tasted like the water she'd been drinking and the particular focus of someone giving their full attention to exactly one thing. When she pulled back, she looked at me, close, her hands still at my face. "The coffee," she said. "Month 3. "Yes," I said. "I know." I should have said something then. "You weren't ready then." "No." Her thumb moved along my jaw. "I'm better at bodies than feelings." "I know." I held her gaze. "You're figuring it out." "Slowly." "That's fine." She looked at me, the full expression, present and open and entirely chosen. "The shoulder," she said. "Your correction was right." "I know." "I was going to fix it." "I know that too." "I just," the corner of her mouth, "needed you to stop being a trainer for a minute." "I noticed," I said. She stepped back. Not far. The space between us was different now. Not the professional distance, not the managed distance, something that had been recalibrated without announcement. "I'm still your client," she said. "Yes." "That's complicated," I said. "Yes." "I don't do complicated." "You do surgery," I said. "Everything you do is complicated." She looked at me. Something moved through her expression that was almost a smile and kept going until it was one. Real, sudden, the kind that changed her whole face. "That's fair," she said. She picked up her bag. At the door, she turned. "Tuesday," she said. "Tuesday," I confirmed, "as a client." "Of course." "And—" She stopped. "And?" I said. She held my gaze for a moment. Then she left. I stood in the empty gym against the wall that had held my back 20 minutes ago and thought about 6 months and the coffee and not like that and the line I'd been maintaining. I thought about the correct file. I thought, I know exactly what's in it. Tuesday came. She arrived exactly on time. She changed. She was ready. All of this was exactly the same as every other Tuesday for 6 months. What was different was the moment she came out of the changing room and looked at me across the gym. The specific look, not the assessment look, the other one, the one I'd been getting in fragments and was now getting in full. And I thought, she's not filing this incorrectly anymore. Neither was I. The session was good. Her form was right. Her shoulder had the clean mechanics of something fully healed, working at capacity, no compensation. I told her so, and she received it with the confirmation expression, hypothesis proven, and went back to work. Afterward, on the bench by the water cooler, I handed her coffee before she could hand me mine. She looked at the cup. "Black," she said. "Always." She looked at me. "You remembered." "I've been paying attention for 6 months." "So have I." She took the cup, apparently to the wrong things. "What were you paying attention to?" She considered this with the seriousness she brought to direct questions. "Your hands," she said, "specifically." I stared at her. "My hands?" "You correct form without touching unless it's necessary. When it's necessary, you're precise." She looked at her coffee. "I noticed your hands in session 3 and spent the rest of the month telling myself it was professional observation." "It wasn't?" "It was also professional observation." She met my eyes. "It was both things." I thought about the amber and cedar, and the 30 minutes of talking, and the jaw that clenched, and the wall on Thursday. "Ivy," I said. "Quinn." "What happens now?" She held her coffee cup in both hands, the specific grip, both hands, the way she held everything warm, and looked at the gym around us, the space that had been ours for 6 months. "I have a suggestion," she said. "What kind of suggestion?" "The kind that requires you to not be my trainer for the duration." I looked at her. "The duration of what?" She met my gaze, directly. No assessment overlay, no management, no professional distance. "Dinner," she said. "This Saturday. There's a place I know." A pause. "I've been meaning to take you there for approximately 3 months." 3 months? "Since the session with the mat." She looked at her coffee. "When you made me stop. When I lay there and my face did something I didn't plan for it to do and you didn't comment." She looked up. I thought, I want to take her somewhere and have a meal and not be a patient. I held her gaze. "And then?" I said. "And then I filed it incorrectly for 3 months." The corner of her mouth. "I'm correcting the filing." I looked at her. The surgeon who talked like testimony and brought coffee with oat milk and had put my back against a wall on a Thursday at 7:15 with the precision of someone who had decided. "Saturday," I said. "Yes." She nodded once, definitive, the way she agreed to things she'd already decided were correct. We finished the coffee. She stood to leave. At the door she paused, the same pause as Thursday, the same turn. "Quinn," she said. "Ivy." "Your left shoulder drops when you demonstrate the press." She said it entirely straight-faced. "Thought you should know." I stared at her. The corner of her mouth went all the way. She left. I sat on the bench in the empty gym and felt something move through my chest that was warm and specific and exactly right, and thought about 6 months and the wall and the coffee with oat milk, and thought, she noticed my left shoulder. Of course she did. She paid attention to everything. I just hadn't known, until recently, that the everything included me. Saturday arrived clear and cold, the kind of November day that apologizes for nothing. She was already there when I arrived. Of course she was. She was always early, I knew this. At a corner table in a restaurant that was warm and not loud, and clearly chosen with intention. She stood when she saw me cross the room. She was wearing something dark and simply cut, nothing that required description except to say it was entirely her. No excess, no performance, just the correct thing. "Hi," I said. "Hi." She pulled out the chair across from her. "Sit down." "You're seating me?" "I got here first." She sat down. "I have opinions about which chair has the better sightline." Of course you do. The one you're in faces the room. She opened her menu. You're welcome. I looked at her across the table, the sharp jaw and the dark eyes and the composed precision, and underneath it, very clearly to me now, to me who had been paying attention for 6 months, the other thing. The version that showed up on the mat and in the gym at 7:15 when she stopped filing things incorrectly. 3 months, I said. She looked up. You said you'd been meaning to bring me here for 3 months. Yes. That's the session with the mat? Yes. She looked at her menu. You made me stop. You knew I was working something out the wrong way, and you made me stop, and then you made me lie on a mat, and you walked me through something slow and deliberate, and She paused. You what? She looked up. The full expression, right here, in a restaurant on a Saturday evening. I thought, this person pays attention to me in a way I'm not used to, she said, and I didn't know what to do with that, so I went home and tried to file it somewhere sensible. Where did you file it? Professional admiration, she said, initially. And then? And then the coffee happened and I moved it. She looked at her menu again. Several times, it kept not fitting. I looked at her across the table. What file does it fit now? She set the menu down. She looked at me with the expression that had been building for 6 months and was now, in this restaurant on this Saturday, simply present. No management, no assessment overlay, nothing between it and the surface. You, she said, that's the file. She held my gaze. Just you. I felt that in my entire chest. Ivy, I said. Quinn, she said back, low, the way she'd said it against the wall. Your left shoulder drops on the press, I said. Something moved through her face. The not-quite smile becoming the real one, sudden and transforming, the smile that I had been waiting to see properly and was now seeing across a restaurant table with November outside the windows. I know, she said. I'm working on it. I'll keep an eye on it. I was counting on that. She picked up her menu. Now, what are you having? We had dinner. We talked for 3 hours, not about training, not about shoulder mechanics, not about anything professional, about the things that had been circling the edges of 30-minute post-session conversations for months and had never had enough space. She was, I want to say again because it bears repeating, genuinely interesting. Not the surgeon's precision, though that was there too, but the person underneath it, the opinions on things she'd read, the dry, specific humor that appeared at unexpected moments, the way she listened with her whole attention when I talked, the way she asked questions that were really propositions in disguise. She told me about her residency, the specific exhaustion of it, the way it had required her to become someone very competent and very sealed, because sealed was the only way to survive it. She'd emerged from it 7 years ago and hadn't fully unsealed since. The mat session, I said, was that unsealing? She considered it. Partially, she said. The shoulder injury was also, she paused, instructive. I'd spent 7 years treating bodies as systems, and then my own system broke and I had to become a patient, and it was, another pause. Humbling is the clean version. What's the other version? She looked at me. Terrifying, she said simply. I had no control. For the first time in a long time, something was happening to me that I couldn't manage. She held my gaze. And then you came in and you were very calm about it. You treated it like a solvable problem without making me feel like a problem. You weren't a problem. No. She looked at the table. You made that very clear. And it was... She stopped. It was what? The first time in a long time, she said carefully, that someone saw the limitation and wasn't diminished by it, wasn't treating me as less. She met my eyes. You just worked with what was there and asked what I wanted. I held her gaze. You said full function, I said, 8 weeks. You said ambitious. And then you got there in 7, the corner of her mouth. 6.5. 6.5, I conceded. Overachiever. She shook her head, the real smile briefly, full and unguarded. We walked out into the November night and stood on the pavement outside the restaurant. She had her coat on and her hands in her pockets and was looking at the street with the specific quality of someone who has had a good evening and is not ready to end it. "Quinn," she said. "Ivy. I want to say something." "Say it." She turned to look at me. The November cold, the street lamp catching the angles of her face, the expression that was fully open. "I've been sealed for a long time," she said. "Not just since the residency. Since before. It's efficient. Things don't get in. Things don't get out." She paused. "You got in." 6 months ago," I said. "Before that, probably." She looked at me. "But 6 months ago is when I noticed." I looked at her on the pavement, the amber and cedar even in the cold, the jaw that had been clenched and then unclenched and had been teaching me its language for half a year. "Ivy," I said. Stop being sealed." She looked at me for a moment. Then she took her hands out of her pockets and took my face in both of them, the same hands that had been on my shoulders against the wall, warm and specific and entirely deliberate, and kissed me in the November street with the full attention she brought to things she'd decided. When she pulled back, she looked at me. "I'm working on it," she said. "The ceiling." "I know." I held her gaze. "You're figuring it out." "With assistance." "Whenever you need it." She looked at me. Something in her expression was the open version, all the way. No management, no overlay, just Ivy. The actual version. The one that showed up on mats and in empty gyms and in restaurant corners and on November pavements when she finally stopped filing things incorrectly. "Tuesday," she said. "As a client?" She thought about it. Then, "As whatever we're figuring out." She held my gaze. "Is that acceptable?" "Yes," I said. "That's acceptable." She nodded. Once decisive, the way she agreed to things she'd already decided were right. She walked in the direction of her flat. I watched her go. Dark coat, precise posture, exactly herself. I stood on the pavement and thought about 6 months, and the coffee and the wall on Thursday, and the left shoulder that dropped on the press. I thought about the correct file, finally correctly filed. I thought, it took 6 months and a wall and a very precise pair of hands. And I thought, some things take exactly that long, not a day more, not a day less, exactly right. Tuesday arrived and she was exactly on time, as always, and she handed me coffee, black for her, oat milk for me, without looking at me, which was the same as always except that the not looking had a different quality now. Not avoidance. The specific not looking of someone who is very aware of where they are not looking. I took the coffee. "Form check first," I said. "Then we program the next block." "The next block," she said. "As in, you're planning beyond the immediate session. That's what programming means." "I know what programming means." She set her bag down. "I'm asking whether you've decided I'm a long-term client." I looked at her. "Have you decided you're a long-term client?" She held my gaze for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I have." "Then I'm programming the next block." I picked up my tablet. "Warm up. I'll be there in 2 minutes." She warmed up. I watched her from the desk and thought about whatever we're figuring out and thought, I know what we're figuring out. I've known for at least 3 months. The session was clean. Her form was excellent, better than it had been in weeks. Something had released. I could see it in the way she moved. The shoulders sitting naturally, the compensations gone. She was in her body differently. More present, less performance. Afterward, she sat on the bench and I sat beside her, and we drank our coffee, and neither of us said anything for a while. "The next block," she said eventually. 6 weeks, strength focus. We can start pushing the numbers properly now that the mechanics are solid." "What numbers am I looking at?" I told her. She listened with the concentrated attention she brought to information that mattered, asked 2 precise questions, accepted the answers. Then she said, "Saturday was good." Yes, I said. It was. I'd like to do it again. What, dinner? Dinner, or other things. She held her coffee cup in both hands. I'm not practiced at this. The figuring out. I usually know what something is before I start it. And this you don't know. I know what it is. She looked at me. I don't know what to do with it. Those are different problems. I held her gaze. What is it? She looked at her coffee. Something I stopped filing incorrectly, she said. Something that has been in the correct file for approximately 2 weeks and is, she paused, larger than I'd accounted for. Larger how? She set the coffee down. She turned on the bench to face me more fully. The deliberate reorientation, everything she did with intention. I think about you outside of sessions, she said. I've been thinking about you outside of sessions for months, and I told myself it was case management, tracking a client's progress, anticipating the next correction. She met my gaze. It was not case management. No, I said. I thought about Tuesday on Saturday morning, she said, before the session, specifically about what it would be like to walk in and have it be different. Now that things are different. She paused. That's not how I think about sessions. Sessions are work. I don't think about work the way I was thinking about Tuesday. I looked at her. The bench, the empty gym, the 2 coffee cups, the 6 months behind us and the whatever it was in front of us. How were you thinking about Tuesday? I said. She held my gaze. Like something I was looking forward to, she said. Specifically because of who would be in it. She paused. I'm not usually... She stopped. Not usually what? Someone who looks forward to things, she said, with the flatness of honesty rather than self-pity. I complete things. I achieve things. I look forward to the completion. She looked at her hands. This is different. I'm looking forward to the middle of it, the being in it part. I sat with that for a moment. Ivy, I said. Quinn? I've been looking forward to Tuesdays for 4 months, I said. Not the sessions, Tuesdays specifically, because of who would be in them. She looked at me. 4 months, she said. Month 3, I said. The mat session, the face you made when the tension left. I held her gaze. I filed it correctly immediately and spent 4 months pretending I hadn't. She was very still. You knew, she said. Yes. And you maintained the professional distance, yes. Why? I looked at her. Because you were my client and I didn't know what you wanted, and assuming seemed like the wrong call. I brought you coffee. Clients bring trainers coffee. With oat milk, she said, after memorizing your order 2 months in. I noticed, I said. I still didn't assume. She looked at me with an expression that was caught between exasperated and something warmer. You should have assumed, she said. Probably. We lost 3 months. We were figuring it out, I said. We're still figuring it out. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached over and covered my hand with hers. The specific, deliberate gesture. No accident, no ambiguity. Quinn, she said. Ivy. I'd like to keep figuring it out. She held my gaze. If you're willing. I've been willing since month 3, I said. You're catching up. The corner of her mouth went all the way. I move at my own pace, she said. I know. I turned my hand over so our fingers aligned. I've been watching. She shook her head, but she didn't move her hand. We sat on the bench in the empty gym with our fingers laced and our coffee cooling and the November evening outside the industrial windows, and neither of us said anything for a while, which was exactly right. The weeks that followed were a quiet reorganization. She was not effusive. I hadn't expected her to be. She showed up differently, not in ways that anyone watching would have flagged as significant, but in ways I could read because I'd been reading her for 6 months. She made eye contact slightly longer in sessions. She touched my arm once when I made a correction, briefly, the back of my hand against her forearm. Nothing that could be classified as anything except present. She texted. This was new. Practical texts, mostly. Scheduling. Questions about the program. Once a recommendation for a book she'd read that she thought I'd find interesting. Delivered with the matter-of-fact brevity of someone who had decided to share a thing and didn't feel the need to explain why. I read the book. I told her what I thought. She told me I was wrong about the 3rd chapter. We argued about it for 20 minutes via text on a Tuesday night, and I thought, this is what people mean when they say they've met someone who fits. She was difficult in the specific ways I'd been expecting. Private about certain things, slow to open certain doors, occasionally disappeared into work for 3 or 4 days in a way that I understood was not withdrawal, but simply the nature of being someone whose work had the stakes hers did. I learned not to take the silences personally. She learned, incrementally, to surface from them without prompting. I went dark for 4 days, she said one Tuesday. I'm aware. The Morrison case, I said. Brendan mentioned it was complicated. She looked at me. You talked to Brendan about my case? He mentioned it in passing. He follows the medical news. I looked at her. Are you all right? A pause, the kind that meant she was deciding whether to answer the actual question. Yes, she said. It went well in the end. She looked at her hands. It's... She stopped. Hard, I said. When it's a hard case. Yes. You can say that, I said. It's allowed. She looked at me. Something in her expression was caught, the sealed version meeting the other version. I know, she said. I'm practicing. I know you are. She exhaled once. It was hard, she said. The case. 4 days of very hard. She held my gaze. And then I came here on Tuesday and you handed me coffee, and you didn't ask anything and you just started the session. She paused. That was the right call. You weren't ready for questions yet? No. She looked at the bench. But I was ready for this. The session. The normalness of it. She met my eyes. You knew that. I've been paying attention, I said. 6 months, she said. 7 now. She looked at me, the full expression clear and present and chosen. Thank you, she said, for knowing. Don't thank me. I'm going to anyway. She held my gaze. And Quinn. I'm going to get better at surfacing, she said. From the silences. I know it's... She paused. I know it's not easy to be on the other side of them. I'm not going anywhere, I said. She looked at me for a moment. Something moved through her face that was the open version at full capacity. No management, no overlay, just her. Choosing to be here. Fully. Good, she said. The gym was warm and the November evening was dark outside, and she was sitting beside me on the bench with her fingers close to mine on the seat between us, not touching but close, the specific proximity of 2 people who know where they are and what it means. The left shoulder, she said. What about it? It's better. She rolled it once, testing. Whatever you adjusted in the program last week worked. I know. I looked at her. I noticed on Thursday. She looked at me sideways. You noticed on Thursday and didn't say anything. You were focused. I didn't want to interrupt. You interrupt when form is wrong. It wasn't wrong, I said. It was right. I didn't want to interrupt that either. She looked at me for a moment. That's... She started. What? Considerate, she said, like the word was slightly unfamiliar in this context. You're very considerate. I've been noticing. I notice you noticing, I said. She shook her head, the small, specific shake she did when something had landed somewhere real. Quinn, she said. Ivy. Dinner again, she said. This Saturday. The same place or somewhere different, your choice. Somewhere different, I said. I know a place. Yes? Small. Good food. They know me. I looked at her. You'll like it. She looked back, the full expression. I trust your assessment. she said. It was such a small thing, 4 words, but from someone who assessed everything herself and trusted her own assessment above all others, it was the size of something much larger. Good, I said. She stood up, put on her coat, picked up her bag. At the door, she paused. The pause I knew, the turn I knew. 7 months, she said. Yes. It took 7 months. Yes, I said, it did. She looked at me. Worth it? She said. I held her gaze across the empty gym, across the bench and the coffee cups and the industrial windows, and the 6 months of professional distance, and the Thursday wall and the Saturday restaurant, and the November pavement. Yes, I said. Obviously. The corner of her mouth. She left. I sat in the empty gym and thought about the wall and the coffee and the mat session, and the correct file finally filed. I thought about left shoulders and long silences, and a woman who brought coffee with oat milk after memorizing my order in month 2. I thought, 7 months. I thought, worth every single session. Every single one. December arrived, and with it, the specific quality of a city preparing itself for something. Lights in windows, cold that had opinions, the general sense of time compressing toward an end. She brought me something on the first Tuesday of December. Not coffee. She brought that too, automatically, the way she'd been doing for months. But also a small thing, wrapped without ceremony, set on the desk without comment while she got ready for the session. I looked at it. What's this? I said. Open it after, she said, already stretching. I opened it after. It was a book, not the one we'd argued about. A different one, older, the kind with a spine that showed it had been read before. Inside the front cover, in her handwriting, small and precise, for the correct file. I sat on the bench and held it, and felt something move through my chest that required a moment. She came out of the changing room and saw my face. Too much? She said. No. I held the book up. This is... No, not too much. She sat beside me. Not at the other end, right beside me. I found it months ago, she said. I've been carrying it around deciding whether to give it to you. She looked at the bench. It's about a woman who spends a long time looking at something from the wrong angle, and then she turns and it's entirely different. She paused. I thought it was relevant. How long have you been carrying it? I said. She was quiet for a moment. Since month 4, she said. After the mat session. I stared at her. You've been carrying this book for 3 months. I was deciding. She met my eyes. I make decisions slowly when they matter. You pinned me against a wall on a Thursday. That was... The corner of her mouth. That was a fast decision. I'd been building to it for a while. I looked at the book in my hands. The inscription. For the correct file. Ivy, I said. Quinn. Thank you. Don't thank me. But she said it softer than she usually said it, the version without deflection. I'm going to anyway. She looked at the book, then at me, the full expression, present and warm and entirely unmanaged. The inscription, she said. Was that exactly right? I said, yes. She exhaled once, short, the specific exhale of someone who has been holding something and has just been told they can set it down. We sat on the bench and I held the book, and outside, December moved through its preparations, and neither of us said anything for a while, because some things don't need saying, and we were both, I was discovering, people who understood that. Brendan found out on a Wednesday. Not from me, from the specific quality of my mood, which he read with the accuracy of someone who had been watching humans in states of physical and emotional exertion for years. The surgeon, he said. I looked at him. Just checking, he said. You've been insufferably... He searched for it. Not insufferable, actually. The opposite. You've been suspiciously content. I'm always content. You're usually focused, he said. This is different. This is... He tilted his head. Settled. I looked at him. Yes, I said. The surgeon. He nodded slowly. "She came in last week," he said, "and she looked at you across the gym the second she came through the door, like she was checking you were still there." He picked up his coffee. "I've been watching clients for 9 years. That's not how clients look at trainers." "No," I said. "How long?" 7 months, technically. 2 weeks, actually." He made the sound of someone whose theory has just been confirmed. "I told you," he said. "In April. You stayed late to tell me she kept her sessions." "You didn't tell me anything." "I thought it very loudly in your direction." I shook my head. He grinned. "She's good for you," he said. "Whatever it is, you're less in your head." "I'm always in my head." "Less than usual." He looked at me. "Which, given the size of your head, is probably healthy." I threw a resistance band at him. He caught it. "I'm happy for you," he said, genuine underneath the grin. "Both of you. From what I've seen of her, she doesn't do anything casually. If she's in, she's all the way in." I thought about the book in my bag, the inscription, 4 months of carrying it. "Yes," I said, "she is." Christmas came, and with it the question of what to do with it. We had not discussed Christmas. It was the kind of thing that required navigation, the first major calendar event in whatever we were figuring out, the place where things either became more real or got complicated. She raised it on a Tuesday in mid-December, in the after-session way, coffee in hand. "Christmas," she said. "Yes. I go to my mother's." She held the cup. "Every year, it's—" She paused. "Non-negotiable." "That's fine. I'll be gone 4 days." She looked at me. "I want you to know, so there's no—" She stopped. "Silence you have to explain?" "Yes." She looked at her coffee. "I'm practicing, surfacing before I disappear rather than after." "I know." I looked at her. "Thank you for telling me." She nodded, then, "And before I go—" "Yes?" She met my gaze. "I want to—" She stopped, the deciding pause, the specific one. "Say it," I said. "I want to say it properly," she said. "Before Christmas, before the 4 days." She held my gaze. "I've been saying things around it, and I want to say the thing." The gym was quiet. The December light through the windows was low and specific. "Say it," I said again. Quiet. She looked at me. "I'm in love with you," she said. The same flatness she used for important information. Not underplayed. Precise. The way she said everything that was true. "I've been moving toward that since month 3, and I arrived at it somewhere around Thursday of week 24, and I've been—" She paused. "Carrying it. The way I carried the book." I held her gaze. "Ivy," I said. "I know it's—" She started. "I'm in love with you too," I said. "Since month 4, the mat session, when your face did the thing." She stared at me. "Month 4, she said. "Yes." "You've been carrying it," I said. "The way you carry things, until the moment is right." She looked at me for a long moment. Something moved through her expression that was the widest version of the open one. No management anywhere, nothing contained, nothing in the wrong file. She put her coffee down. She crossed to where I was sitting on the bench and stood in front of me and put both hands on my face. The specific gesture, warm and deliberate, the hands that corrected and steadied and had been on my shoulders against a wall on a Thursday at 7:15. "Quinn," she said. "Ivy." "Month 4, she said. "We wasted 2 months." "We were figuring it out." "I'm done figuring," she said. "I know what it is." "So do I." She kissed me in the December gym with her hands at my face and her coffee going cold on the bench and the low winter light through the industrial windows, and it tasted like every correct file and 7 months and a book carried for 3 and a wall on a Thursday. When she pulled back, she stayed close. 4 days at my mother's, she said. 4 days, I agreed, and then Tuesday. Tuesday, I said. I'll be here. She looked at me, the full expression, all the way, no reservations, the Ivy that existed when she stopped being sealed. "I know," she said. "That's the point." She picked up her bag. She picked up her coffee. At the door, she paused. The pause, the turn. "Quinn." "Ivy." "The left shoulder." She rolled it once, testing, easy and clean. "Fully healed." "I know," I said. "Has been for months." "Then why—" She tilted her head. "Because you kept coming back," I said, "and I kept finding reasons for you to." She looked at me across the gym. Something moved through her face, the smile, the real one, the sudden transforming one. "Is that ethical?" she said. "Probably not," I said. "It was effective." She shook her head, the smile staying. "Tuesday," she said. "Tuesday," I confirmed. She left. I sat in the December gym and held the book she'd given me and thought about 7 months and a left shoulder and a wall and a mat and coffee with oat milk and a woman who carried things carefully until she decided to set them down. I thought about the correct file. I thought about what was in it now. I thought, this, all of this. Every session, every silence, every correction, and every 30 minutes of talking after, and every Tuesday that was a Tuesday because of who was in it. The gym was quiet. December moved through its preparations outside. The book was in my hands. I thought, some things are worth 7 months of patience. I thought, some things are worth every wall. This one, without question, without reservation, from the mat to the bench to the December light, was. Every single correct-filed amber and cedar left shoulder dropping minute. Worth it. Completely. January arrived and she came back from her mother's on a Sunday evening and texted at 9:15. "Back. Tuesday still on." 3 words. Entirely her. I sent back, "Tuesday, yes." She sent, "Good." That was the whole of it, and it was exactly enough. Tuesday, she walked in with coffee, oat milk, no discussion, and we ran the session, and it was the same as every other session except that it wasn't, because things had been said in December, and said things changed the texture of everything that follows. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone watching would have pinpointed, but I knew it and she knew it, and the knowing was present in every correction and every confirmation and every moment of the specific attention we paid to each other. Afterward, she sat beside me on the bench and said, "My mother asked about you." I looked at her. "Your mother?" I mentioned something. "Over Christmas." She held her coffee. "More than I intended to mention, probably. She's perceptive." "What did she ask?" "Whether I was happy." She looked at the bench. I said yes. She asked why. I said... She paused. "What did you say?" She met my gaze. I said, "There's someone who pays attention in a way I'm not used to." She held my gaze. She asked what that meant. I said, "It means I'm less sealed than I was." She paused. She said, "Good. She's been worried about the sealing for years." I held her gaze. "And are you?" "Less sealed." She looked at me. "Yes," she said, simply, "considerably." She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "It's unfamiliar, being this open with someone. I keep waiting for it to feel wrong." She met my eyes. "It doesn't." "Good," I said. "It feels—" She stopped. "What?" She looked at me with the full expression, the January version of it, the one that had been building since April and was now entirely, permanently in the correct file. "Like the right thing," she said. "Specifically, you're the right thing." She said it with the same flatness she used for facts. "I wanted you to know that." I looked at her on the bench, the coffee in both hands. The sharp jaw and the direct eyes, and 7 months of sessions, and a Thursday wall, and a December inscription, and the left shoulder that had been healed for months. "I know," I said. "I've known since month 4. She shook her head. "Month 4, and you said nothing." "You said nothing either." I was figuring it out. So was I. She looked at me for a moment. We were both terrible at this, she said. Yes. For 4 months. 3, technically. Once you brought the coffee, I was fairly certain. She stared at me. Month 3 and you were fairly certain and you still said nothing. You were my client. I brought you coffee with oat milk. Clients. Quinn. She set her coffee down. Clients do not memorize your order in month 2. Some clients. No, she said. They don't. She looked at me with the expression that was exasperated and fond in equal measure, the specific combination that had been developing since December. You should have said something in month 3. Probably, I said. But then we wouldn't have had the wall. She was quiet. The wall, she said. You put my back against a wall, I said. In week 24. That doesn't happen if things move faster. That specific moment. The build to it. I held her gaze. I wouldn't trade it. She looked at me for a long moment. Neither would I, she said quietly. I reached over and covered her hand with mine. She turned her hand over immediately, fingers aligning, the Ivy version of hand-holding, certain and deliberate and entirely meant. January, I said. Yes. What does January look like? She considered it. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she said. Sessions. And, she paused, other things. Building on December. What kind of other things? She met my gaze, the full expression, no qualifications. The kind that require not being a trainer and not being a client, she said. Just, she paused, people, figuring it out. We've been figuring it out for a while. We're good at it now, she said. Practice. I looked at her. January light through the industrial windows, pale and specific. The gym quiet around us, her hand in mine. Ivy, I said. Quinn. I'm glad you stayed, I said. After the rehab was done, I'm glad you decided things were working. She looked at me. I'm glad I stayed too, she said. Though, for the record, she paused. What? I knew in month 2 that I was going to stay. She met my gaze. The session when you made me stop and took me to the mat, I knew before that session was over. She paused. I just needed a reason that wasn't the real reason, I said. Yes. She looked at our joined hands. It's easier to stay for professional reasons. Cleaner. And now? She looked up at me, the full expression. Nothing cleaner about it, just true. Now I stay for the real reason, she said. I squeezed her hand once. Good, I said. Outside, January was doing what January does, relentless and bare and not apologizing for it. Inside, the gym was warm, and we were on the bench with our hands together and the coffee going cold, and 7 months of sessions sat behind us like the long approach to something that had always been waiting at the end of it. I thought about the wall, and the mat, and the coffee, and the book with the inscription. I thought about the left shoulder, fully healed, sitting exactly right. I thought, 7 months. I thought, every correct minute of every correct session. And I thought, worth it. From the first Tuesday in April to this Tuesday in January, every single one. February brought something I hadn't seen coming. She played, not piano, she didn't play piano, but she did something equivalently revealing. She showed up on a Tuesday with a folder under her arm and said, in the between-session way, I want to show you something. The folder was research. Printed papers, annotated in her handwriting, dense and specific. A technique she'd been reading about, a surgical approach, something new, something she was considering incorporating. She talked me through it with the same precision she brought to everything, and I listened and asked questions, and she answered them, and halfway through I realized she was showing me her work, not explaining it, not reporting it, showing it to me because she wanted me to see it, because it mattered to her, and she had decided I was someone to show things to. I looked at the annotations in the margins, the specific handwriting, small, exact, full of small stars where something had struck her as particularly significant. "You annotate when you read," I said. "Of course." "Stars for the important parts." She looked at the paper. "The stars are—" She paused. "The parts I want to come back to, the parts that need more thought." I thought about the book she'd given me, the inscription, the 3 months of carrying it. I thought about whether there were stars in the margins of what she'd been reading about me, and thought, probably yes, in her own way. Her own annotation system, things she'd noted and returned to and decided needed more thought. "This is good," I said, "about the technique. This is genuinely interesting." She looked at me. Something in her expression was the specific kind of pleased that comes from being taken seriously by someone you want to take you seriously. "You understood it," she said. "I understood the part about the mechanics," I said, "the physiology side. The rest I'd need more time with." "I could explain the rest," she said, carefully, "if you wanted." I looked at her. "Are you offering to teach me surgery?" "I'm offering to explain the reasoning," she said. "There's a difference." A pause. "I don't usually—" She stopped. "Don't usually what?" "Talk about work," she said. "Outside of work. It's—" She looked at the papers. "It's easier to keep them separate, work and the rest." "And now?" She met my gaze. "Now I want to show you things," she said. "The work is part of me. Showing you the work is showing you me." She held my gaze. "I'm practicing." I looked at her across the bench, across the folder of annotated research and the 2 coffee cups and the January, now February, gym with its industrial windows. "Show me," I said. "All of it. Whenever you want." She looked at me. Then she flipped to the next page and started explaining the reasoning, and I listened, and she talked with her hands for the first time since I'd known her. Small, specific gestures, the precision of someone who was also animated, and I thought, there it is, the sealedness, finally open, the full version. She talked for 40 minutes. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, she looked up and caught my expression and went still. "What?" she said. "Nothing," I said. "You have an expression." "I'm listening." "You're—" She stopped. "Read me." "You're looking at me like—" She stopped again. "Like what?" I said. She held my gaze. "Like I'm interesting," she said. "The way you looked at me in month 3. The way you looked at me on the mat." She paused. "Like I'm worth paying attention to." "You are," I said. "Obviously." She was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said. Quiet. "I'm still getting used to it." "Take your time," I said. She looked at me. The full expression, present and open and the furthest thing from sealed. "February," she said. "Yes." "What does February look like?" I thought about it. "Like this," I said. "Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sessions. You showing me things. Me paying attention." I held her gaze. "And whatever else we're building toward." "What are we building toward?" I looked at her. The February light through the industrial windows, the folder of annotated papers, the coffee with oat milk that she still brought without asking. "Something with good bones," I said, "that holds." She looked at me for a long moment. Then the corner of her mouth went all the way. "I'm a surgeon," she said. "I understand good bones." "I know," I said. She picked up her coffee. I picked up mine. Outside, February was cold and unrelenting and entirely indifferent. Inside the gym, 2 people sat on a bench with a folder of research between them and their fingers close on the bench between them, and everything was in the correct file, and the left shoulder sat exactly right, and 7 months of sessions had arrived here, at this Tuesday, at this February, at this good-boned thing that was still being built. I thought, this is what it looks like. When something is filed correctly, when the wall works and the mat works, and the coffee with oat milk is the tell, and the book has an inscription, and the shoulder heals, and the sealed thing opens, slowly, over 7 months of Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is what it looks like. Worth every session, every single one.